I am a 24-year-old woman who recently inherited a house from my late aunt. My aunt was eccentric yet wealthy, never hesitating to acquire whatever she desired. This two-story house was one of her luxuries. It featured a pool in the front yard, and despite being lifelong single, she purchased a large home. It seems it wasn't particularly a necessity for her. My aunt passed away a few months ago at the age of 65. Much of the estate she left behind was divided among those she favored. Thankfully, I was included among them. I received this house, valued at $750,000, and the rest of the estate was divided among several relatives. Since then, I have lived in this house for the past 2 weeks. Although I haven't finished unpacking yet, I've grown quite fond of this place. My parents, who learned I had moved here, expressed a desire to see my new home and said they would visit the day after I moved. My mother came with her 16-year-old stepdaughter. I felt a bit uncomfortable. I had thought it would be just my mother coming. Still, I didn't dislike my stepsister, so I didn't mind it much. She was reserved towards me, so I couldn't particularly like her. However, I was kind to her, yet she seemed particularly close not to me but to my parents. My parents have been divorced for the last 20 years. They separated when I was 4 years old. Even after the divorce, my parents cooperated to raise me, maintaining a good relationship. Growing up, I realized that they had just grown apart in personality and values, not engaging in a bitter divorce. On the contrary, they continued their relationship as trusting friends. Thanks to that, I was raised maintaining good relations with both parents. However, our distance naturally grew after my mother remarried a few years ago. She had been dating her current husband for 2 years, and I had met him several times during their courtship, behaving politely. Thus, I hadn't expected her to distance herself somewhat after getting married, but it didn't particularly bother me. It seemed natural for her to spend her time with her new family now that I was an adult and independent. Meanwhile, my father remained single, so I have spent more time with him in recent years. Now, I could say my relationship with him is closer than with my mother. Still, I had hoped to celebrate this new chapter in my life with both parents. However, my mother's demeanor was somewhat aloof, almost like she was a different person. Moreover, both she and my stepsister acted cold and distant, as if we had just met, making me feel quite uncomfortable. She no longer seemed at ease, and there was nothing I could do. Not wanting to complicate things further, I had no choice but to accept it. Over the past few years, I only saw my mother a few times a year, mainly during holidays. Although she had been relaxed and enjoyable during those times, this was entirely different. I couldn't help but think it was because my stepsister was present. Still uncertain, I refrained from mentioning it to my mother. On the other hand, my father liked the house very much, saying, "It's just right for you and your mother." They seemed pleased with the house, which made me very happy. So much so, I suggested hosting Christmas at my place this year. My father was happy with the idea, but my mother and stepsister frowned and remained silent. At that moment, I realized something was off with my mother. Looking back, I should have sensed that something was about to go wrong. About a week ago, I was instructed by my company to attend a conference in the suburbs. The location was a 7-hour drive away, which made me hesitant, but my boss insisted, saying, "I can't entrust this client to anyone but you." So I finally agreed. Additionally, I was encouraged to spend the weekend at the hotel where the conference was being held, offering a chance for a short vacation at no cost. However, one reason for my hesitation was that a very important package was scheduled to arrive on the departure day. It was a rare collector's edition game, and if no one was home to receive it, there was a risk it would be sent back. I had been looking forward to this package, so missing the delivery was not an option. If it were returned, I might have to wait a very long time again. I planned to give this as a gift to my boyfriend for our 3rd anniversary in 2 weeks, so I absolutely needed to receive it as scheduled. My first thought was to ask my father to come to the house and receive the package on my behalf. However, He was going on a trip with friends and would be out of town for 6 days. Since the gift was a surprise for my boyfriend, I couldn't ask him for help. I tried asking a few friends as well, but none were available, and I was close to giving up. I considered asking my neighbors to receive the delivery, but honestly, most of them are middle-aged office workers who are quite unfriendly and cold. I don't get along with them, and even bringing up the subject felt a bit awkward. Wondering why they were so cold towards me, I once asked my father about it. He suggested that maybe they thought I was too young. Still, at this time, I had no other options. It seemed I had to overcome the awkwardness and ask someone in the neighborhood for help. I could have asked my mother, but I knew she would find an excuse to say no. So I dismissed that idea from the start. Honestly, I had been bothered by her attitude the last time we met, and since then, I haven't felt like asking her for anything. I wanted to avoid bothering my mother, so I was hesitant to ask her myself. Surprisingly, it was my mother who contacted me first. We used to call each other frequently before she remarried, but since her remarriage, she hadn't initiated contact unless there was a special reason. So, I listened quietly to what she had to say. My mother started by asking if she could use my house for one day over the weekend. She planned to host her book club meeting and explained that her house was unavailable that day. She promised to pay all expenses for the day and asked to borrow my house keys. She needed to host the meeting, and her husband was due home that day, so she couldn't use their house. I immediately said yes. My mother has been a member of this book club for years, and since my house is a bit far from where she lives, I didn't find her request suspicious. Relieved that I didn't have to worry about the package anymore, I was happy to go on my business trip, allowing my mother to use my house over the weekend. I was planning to be away from home during that period anyway, so the timing was perfect. It worked out well for both of us, and I handed the keys to my mother before I left. This was around 1 p.m., 2 days ago. The client was a bit of an odd character, with a meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning, so there was no need to leave early. It was a 7-hour drive, but I was fully prepared to relax over the weekend. I was headed to the hotel planning to use the spa the next day, but about 5 hours into the drive, my boss called. Apparently, the client had a severe allergic reaction to something they ate a few hours earlier and was hospitalized, resulting in the meeting being canceled. I was honestly frustrated by the news, but there was nothing I could do at that moment, so I decided to stop at a nearby restaurant to eat and consider my next steps. Then, the company instructed me to return home without staying overnight because the client rescheduled for the following weekend, and staying at the hotel would no longer be covered by the company. While eating, I suddenly remembered my house and decided to check on it. It was also a good opportunity to test the new CCTV cameras I had installed a few days ago. The cameras, installed in every room, could be accessed remotely, so I opened the app to check. Surprisingly, the view was not of middle-aged women from the book club discussing books in the living room. Instead, my house was filled with a crowd of teenagers. Not just the living room, but the entire house was swarming with teenagers. I hadn't counted exactly, but there were definitely at least 20 kids filling the house. I was shocked. Not understanding what was happening, I decided to rush home to check the situation. I think it was around 4 p.m. at that time. Realizing that a party was being held in my house without my permission, I was certain my mother and stepsister were involved. I arrived home just before 11 p.m. Loud music could be heard from a block away. As soon as I arrived, I saw kids lounging in the yard, drinking beer, and realized that my stepsister was throwing a big party at my house. I was furious and speechless at the scene. As I opened the door, I felt a strong shock throughout my body. The music was piercing, and I couldn't believe no one had called the police yet. The house was filled with the smell of cheap beer and sweat, and I had to push my way through teenagers dancing, flirting, or just standing there vaping. I searched every room trying to find my stepsister, and the kids looked at me strangely. Finally, I found my stepsister in a quiet bedroom on the second floor. She was sitting on the floor with her friends, laughing and drinking beer. At that moment, I noticed her feet on the pillow on my bed. I felt a surge of anger at that sight. Although she noticed me standing at the doorway, she ignored me and continued talking without saying anything. I could not tolerate such behavior, and I immediately called the police. Then I grabbed her arm, made her stand up, and told her to leave immediately. Fortunately, she was not too drunk to stand on her own, and I was able to get her out of the room without having to hold her for long. However, defiantly, she came up to me and said that she was only using the place because my mother said she could use it today, and that I had no right to kick her out or interfere. Fortunately, this house is mine, not my mother's, and I have the documents to prove it. I informed her that I had called the police. Hearing this, her friends, worried that the police might come, started to panic. Eventually, realizing that they were all drunk and most of them were underage, which could lead to serious trouble within minutes, they all left the scene. After everyone had left, I contacted my mother, the root cause of this ordeal, and yelled at her for betraying my trust. I told her that her daughter had thrown a large party at my house while I was away, and I had to kick out the teenagers present. She had caused a commotion in my house without any prior consultation. It's all my mother's fault. I told my mother that her actions were unacceptable, and that we were fortunate that no one had called the police. However, instead of apologizing, she started to get angry. My mother accused me of overreacting and ruining my stepsister's birthday party. She had always wanted to throw a party for her friends, but her house was too small to host such a large gathering. She thought I would forgive her if it was for my stepsister's sake, just this once. My mother accused me of being selfish, saying that now that I have a big house, it wouldn't hurt to lend it to others when they need it. She claimed that her daughter was only looking at the house to throw a party. She said her daughter hadn't done anything wrong. However, that was a complete misunderstanding. They had not only been drinking but also played music loudly and completely trashed the house. Additionally, I discovered that jewelry had been stolen from the house. Despite being family, my sister who had trespassed was arrested. I informed my mother that they had gotten off with a relatively light punishment, but she still did not seem to grasp the seriousness of what she and her daughter had actually done. She herself had lied to me, saying the house was only for a book club meeting, but she probably just wanted to impress her friends by throwing a party. She had merely used her daughter for that purpose. She should have asked for permission first, since it wasn't her house. My mother said that if she had talked to me first, I would have said no. It seems that this conclusion was drawn by my mother from my previous visits and the years before them. However, of course, that isn't true. It was my stepsister who had consistently been cold and unnatural towards me, not me who was in that position. I tried to show kindness to my stepsister, but it was always one-sided. I said that I had no intention of wasting time trying to win over an arrogant child while arguing with my mother, but eventually I ended the conversation there. She was supposed to arrange and pay for the cleaning because my house had been thoroughly messed up by my stepdaughter and her friends, and it was impossible for me to clean up alone. The house was large, and I had lost the energy to clean it myself. However, she refused, saying that since it was my house, if I kicked out her stepdaughter and embarrassed her in front of school friends, I should clean up my own house. My mother defended her daughter without apologizing or agreeing to compensation. Then, before I could argue back, she hung up and blocked me on everything. It was already quite late, but I was so angry that I immediately contacted her husband and relayed the same information, demanding immediate payment for the chaos his daughter had caused. Fortunately, her husband was calm and sent the money right away. He didn't seem very satisfied, but he did pay. He immediately apologized for what my mother and his daughter had done, and said this. He said he would talk to my mother and his daughter and make them apologize to me. But I was about to say that wasn't necessary when the call was already disconnected. The next morning, I received a very angry call from my mother early in the morning. Apparently, after speaking with me, her husband had talked to her and her daughter, scolded them for their actions, and as a result, my mother was angry that I had involved him without her knowledge. He had grounded his daughter and told my mother that they both needed to apologize to me. However, far from apologizing, my mother yelled at me instead, insisting that her stepdaughter was right and berated me as arrogant and selfish. I was shocked to be on the receiving end of such words from her, especially since all I had done was stand up for what I believed was right. Perhaps it was excessive to call her husband directly, but otherwise, nothing I communicated or requested from my mother was unreasonable. Yet her remarks were completely over the top. 2 days have passed since then, and I haven't been able to talk to anyone about this issue. I still can't believe my mother would say such awful things about me. Even if we had grown less close over the years, there was no need for her to hurt me intentionally. This fact still troubles me. I really don't understand where things went wrong. I always tried to handle everything calmly. If my mother hadn't blocked me, I wouldn't have had to call her husband in the first place. That's why I feel completely justified in contacting my mother's husband to explain the situation regarding her and his daughter's actions. I couldn't remain silent about the chaos they caused in my house during the party. A week has passed since the incident. I'm truly grateful for all the feedback I've received. Thank you to everyone who commented on my initial post. Your perspectives have been valuable. Currently, I'm not in contact with my mother. After that incident, I decided to cut off communication with her. I used to think that my mother distanced herself from me and my father because of her husband's influence, but it turns out my stepsister was the cause. It seems she doesn't like me, and I have no idea why. Even though my stepsister has always been selfish and self-centered, I've always tried to be kind to her. But that's over now. If this is the path my mother has chosen, then I have to live with that reality. Is it sad that my mother chose her stepdaughter over me? Honestly, it is. But I no longer intend to let it trouble my heart. I have had many worries about my relationship with my mother, but recent events have clarified my position and allowed me to make new decisions. It was a shock to feel that my mother prioritized her stepdaughter over our relationship, but through conversations with my father and support from my boyfriend, I've had the chance to gradually understand the reasons. According to my father, my mother feels a special connection to my stepsister because she reminds her of her younger self. My stepsister's mother has passed away, which might also cause my mother to project her ideal mother image onto her. This might explain why my mother prioritizes the stepsister, who reminds her of her past self, over the real daughter with geeky traits like me. While this interpretation brought mixed feelings, accepting it has enabled me to resolve to cut ties with my mother. My father fully supports my decision and has also chosen to cut off contact with her. This support has allowed me to reevaluate the shape of my own family and take a new step forward. During this time, my boyfriend of 3 years proposed to me. The anniversary we spent with dear friends and family turned into a life-changing moment. His planned surprise party was an unforgettable time for me, and the moment I received the engagement ring, I was certain of our future together. I feel happy about this new beginning, although the fact that my mother was absent did shake me a bit. However, with his presence and the support of friends, I am confident about building a happy future. After deciding to sever ties with my mother, we have completely gone our separate ways. My mother seems to enjoy her life with my stepsister, frequently posting photos of their travels and daily life on social media. Occasionally, I hear about her through my father, but there is no direct contact. From the outside, the life of my mother and stepsister seems to go smoothly at times, but I've heard that it's actually quite tumultuous. When I saw on social media how close my mother and stepsister seemed, it looked like a vibrant and warm mother-daughter relationship, but hearing about the real situation through my father revealed a very different story. As my stepsister enters her teenage years, she's been causing frequent trouble at school and in her personal life, with my mother spending her days dealing with it. My stepsister faces many challenges, including bullying issues at school, friendship problems, and falling grades, and it's not uncommon for my mother to be called into school. Additionally, her defiant attitude has become more apparent, leading to frequent arguments with her mother over trivial matters. According to my father, my mother is disappointed that the daughter she hoped would reflect her younger self has turned out to be a troublesome child, and she doesn't know what to do. My mother has tried hard to play the role of an ideal mother, but the gap between reality and her expectations is causing her suffering. Furthermore, my stepsister's problematic behavior is straining my mother's relationship with her husband. He feels that the time and effort my mother spends on his daughter has a negative impact on the whole family, leading to constant arguments. The once harmonious relationship between them has gradually deteriorated due to the presence of my stepsister, a development unexpected by my father, who mentioned that the more she chooses, the more she seems to narrow her own world. My mother's husband tends to be strict with his daughter, while my mother desperately tries to defend her, often leading to clashes in their opinions. I've been told that tensions continue to run high in their home. As a result, my mother smiles less than before and occasionally falls ill due to stress. Still, she continues to prioritize my stepsister, increasing her husband's dissatisfaction, and it's uncertain what the final outcome will be for their family. Every time I receive a report about the problems my mother faces, I feel a strange mix of emotions. While I once felt sadness and anger at being alienated by my mother and her prioritizing my stepsister over me, now I feel a mix of sympathy and loneliness when I hear about the difficulties her choices have caused her. Yet, I understand that I have no right to intervene in my mother's family matters, and I must focus on my own happy future. The difficulties my mother faces are the result of her will to build an ideal mother-daughter relationship clashing with the complexities of reality. However, there's nothing I can do now. My mother must realize and resolve the consequences of her past choices and actions on her own. This is her path, and this is the conclusion I have reached through my growth.